it was 1989 at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and a scandal had started called the mod rehab scandal, where government officials, federal officials, had been steering subsidy to specific projects. You're not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be allocated to local agencies, and local agencies are supposed to choose competitive allocations. But federal officials have been steering to specific projects. And so there was lots of headlines going on. And just at that time, the undersecretary came to me and said, we need to allocate this money specifically to a specific project. I said, wait a minute, this is what we're, all you guys are on the TV saying that these guys are sewer rats and corrupt because they're doing it. Now you're saying you want me to do the same thing. I said, we can't do that. That's illegal. And the other legal issue at the time was the appropriation was out, so we would have to make a commitment on next year's appropriation, and that is illegal. And so I said, you're asking me to break the law. I said, and he said, well, see if you can find a legal way to do this. And I said, I don't think it is. And I think given what you're doing on TV, I don't, you're calling the last guys sewer rats for doing this, so I think you should be careful right now. Because there's no way, whatever we do, that it's going to be a secret. We're Republicans. There are a lot of Democrats down in the mod rehab office, and they're not going to take kindly to this. So anyway, so it was several days later, I got called into the secretary's office, and he said, have you found a way to do this? And I said, no, there's no legal way to do this. You can't, and you're on TV saying that this is wrong. And he was literally, I've never seen a man that frightened in my life. He was scared to death. And I was sure, just from watching him, that he was under extreme political pressure and, I believe, blackmail. And he just looked scared to death. And I went back up to my office, and one of my deputies pulled me aside, and he said, you have to be very, very careful. He said, because... He said, there's real sexual dirt on the secretary. So you have to be real careful. And, there have been all sorts of rumors at the convention about these issues. And I said, well, everybody knows that. It's not. He said, no, it's much worse. Now, one of the things I didn't know was that was the same week that the cover-up or that the Franklin scandal had hit the Washington Times headlines. And I just didn't read the Washington. I was too busy working. I wasn't paying attention to the Washington Times headlines. Now, I then left and went on a field trip out to Illinois, and I got a call from one of my deputies who said they'd gotten called into the undersecretary's office, who had ordered the project-based certificates allocated anyway, and then had called the New York agency to tell them it had been done, and then had called Andrew Cuomo and said to him in Italian, it's done. Apparently it was for the deputy said it was for one of Andrew Cuomo's projects in New York. And so they'd called me in Chicago to let me know, and I picked up the phone and called the general counsel, and I said, let me tell you something. I said, the people in that office are going to know, and they're going to talk. So this is not going to be secret. We're on the radio, we're on the TV saying that all the last guys are corrupt because they did this. This one's going to get out. So I don't know what you're going to do, but you're going to go into the secretary's office, and you're going to go in the undersecretary's office, and you're going to get this stopped, because we will get caught. And it's your guess is as good as mine as to whatever happened. Okay, it's at this point it is a miracle for a political or business leader to rise above a certain level in the hierarchy and not have what's called a control file, which is a file, it's a little bit like the story of J. Edgar Hoover and the dirty pictures, but it's a file with some kind of information that could harm, embarrass, or create civil and criminal liability for a person. And it literally gives the person who has the control file the ability to order them around at very low cost. So if I have a control file on a senator, that senator is going to do what I tell them. And the interesting thing is, even if you don't have a control file, I always encourage all of our subscribers to watch the movie Enemy of the State, because it's a perfect example of Will Smith plays a totally clean lawyer in Washington, and so he's got nothing. His control file is empty, and yet the intelligence agencies are able to, persuade his own family that he's corrupt when he's not. His own partners, he's corrupt when he's not. I went through a similar process, and so people are not only afraid of what's in their control file, but they're afraid of spending 11 years in litigation proving that there's nothing in their control file. So you have a situation where, I'm always get very frustrated with citizens who think, oh, well, let's just go talk to our senator. Well, your senator is subject to these kinds of powers and controls that are very invisible but are very real. There were two books on the Franklin scandal. One was John DeCamp's Franklin Cover-Up, very excellent book, and then Nick Bryant's book. And one of the reasons I wanted to have Nick on is it's very rare you see a scandal that is that thoroughly documented. And the great thing about Nick writing the second book was he went back, very serious investigative reporting, and literally affirmed. And to have two, a lawyer of DeCamp's stature who'd been a state legislature, and then an investigative reporter of Bryant's stature, completely underwriting the full story, documenting it and telling the story, that really gives it very concrete support. And so it's a great example because you saw with the Franklin cover-up sexual entrapment being used to create significant control files. And it's very important to understand when you turn around and you look at $4 trillion going missing from the federal government, how can you engineer that kind of collapse of the internal controls? Well, you can if everybody's got a control file. They're going to have to do what you say, and they're going to have to do it without getting a very big bonus. Because you can imagine how much bonuses you'd have to hand out on stealing $4 trillion if you didn't have those control files. But we're literally watching a government that's being run by coercion, whether it's the blackmail and control files or physical violence. If you don't do what you're told, there are real issues of physical violence now.